This evening's forum. On behalf of Power of Public Education Lafayette, I would like to welcome you to the forum on exploring the school performance score. How does it affect our children? It is sponsored by Power of Public Education Lafayette. PPEL is a not-for-profit organization of parents, educators, and citizens advocating for effective and equitable public schools in Lafayette Parish. PPEL forums provide information from subject area experts and offer an opportunity for members of the community to engage with the information, ask questions, and build understanding in order to take action. Thank you all for attending the forum tonight. We hope it will be one of many to come. We welcome your input and hope, if you have not done so on the way in, that you take the time to give us your contact information so we can include you in future events. Thank you also to the Clifton Chenier Center for allowing us to use this excellent facility. Here with us tonight to inform and guide our discussion of Louisiana's school letter grade system is an esteemed panel of experts currently involved in administering the system, as well as experts who have contributed to the academic understanding of Louisiana's accountability system. Presenters at our forum tonight are, from this end of the table, Tom Spencer, Director of Accountability for the Lafayette Parish Public School System, Noel Hammett, retired Professor of Education from Louisiana State University and former President of the Louisiana School Board Association. He continues to contribute to education research in Louisiana and maintains a blog on public education in Louisiana. Dr. Frank Del Favreau, Professor of Education Administration and Policy Studies at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. He has made important contributions to education scholarship in the areas of measurement and assessment. Finally, Dr. Patrice Pujol, Superintendent of Ascension Parish Schools and the former President of the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. She currently serves as a member of the State Accountability Commission. We thank you, panelists, for giving your time tonight to address people's goal of increasing citizen understanding of major education policy issues. Acadiana Open Channel is taping the forum, and they will be running the program on AOC at a later date. The program tonight will begin with 10-minute presentations by each of the four speakers. There will be time for questions after the speakers have finished their talks. Please hold your questions to the end. I encourage you to write down your questions while you hear the presentations and try your best to make them concise. Our first speaker is Tom Spencer.
10 years ago, this would have taken less than 5 minutes. It's gotten quite more complicated since then. I'm also used to using an overhead projector on a brick wall in the classroom, so this is kind of fancy for me. I'll probably not use the automatic gadget and just hit the arrows over here. All I want to do is tell you how they derive the school performance score. Piece most people are familiar with is the assessment index for our elementary and middle schools. That's comprised of LEAP, iLEAP. There's a very small number of our more severely handicapped special ed kids that take a test known as LOB 1, and that's such a small number we won't discuss the details on that one. We have English and math, and in LEAP that's also high stakes for 4th and 8th graders, science and social studies. For elementary schools without an 8th grade, any school without an 8th grade in the elementary middle configuration, their score is 100% based on that LEAP iLEAP index. For middle schools with an 8th grade, 95% is the assessment index, and there's a 5% factor. We'll get to that slide in just a minute. For high schools, we have an ACT index. They take that test in 11th grade, and it's used when they graduate. They do have an opportunity to take it a second time as seniors if they want to improve their scores. We also have end-of-course assessments, Algebra 1, English 2, Geometry, Biology, English 3, and U.S. History. They take those classes, those tests, whenever they happen to take the class. Okay, Algebra and English, Algebra and Geometry, they have to pass one of those to graduate. And in English 2 and English 3, they have to pass one of those to graduate. And then they have to pass either Biology or U.S. History to graduate. That's also 25% of the high school score, just like the ACT is. Also in middle school, that is, let's say their kids are taking algebra, they do take this test, and they can earn a few bonus points for the middle school. The way the index is derived, each performance level on the test is assigned a specific number of points. For our LEAP and iLEAP, we have 5 performance levels. The 2 lowest receive no points. Basic, which is also considered proficient by the state, gets 100 points, 125 for mastery, and then the advanced students contribute 150 to the index. End of course, there are only 4 performance levels. 0 for the 2 bottom, those are not considered proficient, and then 100 and 150 is what the excellent and good contribute. We have the ACT, that's a sliding scale. A kid has to make at least an 18 to get any points at all, and when they get those points, it's 100, and it goes on all the way up to 150.4 at 36. This was, you don't know this, but I worked at the state for about 10 years doing this accountability stuff. That actually would have been 150 round had I done it while I was there. So that 5% factor for the middle school with the 8th grade is a new invention called a dropout credit accumulation index. It weighs 5% in the middle school score. And the way they get it is however many credits, Carnegie units, a student has at the end of 9th grade, the middle school, wherever the kid attended 8th grade, gets those points. And that's the scale how they're given from 25 up to 150, with 3.5 being the minimum. Graduation data makes up half of a high school score. We have this thing called a cohort graduation rate index. And what they do is they simply take the percentage of kids. They started 9th grade together as first-time 9th graders, and they graduated 4 years later. We're going to go ahead and add on any kids that transfer in before their junior year or before October 1 of their junior year, and also kids who transfer around within the district. If they transfer before October 1 of the senior year, they're added to the cohort. And then we subtract any kids who legitimately transfer out. Okay. Out of state, out of district, private school, homeschool, things of that nature. I just put a few values at the bottom to show you how the formulas work, how they lay out. A school that had a grad rate of 10%, I don't know if we have any of those anymore, but we actually did when we started using grad rate. We get 11.7 points, okay? And if you actually were to put these on a slope, you would see a relatively shallow slope moving up until you hit that 60%, and then you would see it climb quite a bit more sharply as it moves on up to the 100% and the 150. You also take that same group of kids and you determine how they finish high school. What kind of diploma did they get? Did they get any advanced placement credit? Did they do well on what's known as the International Baccalaureate test? I don't think we've even given that one in Lafayette Parish before. If they do really great on those things, then they get 150 points. And then as it moves down to the regular high school diploma, that's 100 points. A GED gets 25. And they tossed in those two at the bottom on the 5-year grad, the 5-year graduate, the kid that we can keep in school for an additional year. They aren't actually counted in the cohort. Those are actually bonus points that show up on that list. Okay, they're going to add 140 points into the numerator, let's say, and they do not increase the denominator on the calculation, so they are pure bonus. There was a lot of ruckus last year when they came out with progress points, and let's see, one particular board member who's over in the budget meeting this evening has made it quite clear that Lafayette would have been a C district if not for progress points. He probably refers to them as bonus points, and he is correct. Okay, they work on the same principle as the value added for teacher evaluations. Okay, an elementary or middle school has to get 50% of their students who were considered non-proficient the prior year. They have to get them to a target that's actually set by a statistical calculation. If they exceed that target, then they're eligible for those progress points. And that's 50%. High schools only need to get 30% of those kids to their expected growth target. That's actually created, the pool was created by kids who got below proficient on their last state test. And then there's some series of ACT tests called Explore, Plan, and then ACT. Explore and Plan set the target, and then ACT determines if they exceeded it or not. So then we have to combine the indices. Let's shift it a little bit around on this particular computer, but I can still see what we have. Okay, for the elementary school, you do that simple index, leap index, and then you can add those progress points on top if the school earned any. You cannot get more than 10 of those progress points. That's the max. High school or elementary middle. Your middle school gets 95% times that leap index. And then we're going to take 5% of that strange dropout credit accumulation index, 5% of it added together. Any progress points the school got, you add on top. Always add it on top. Then your high schools, you're going to figure out each of those 4 indices we mentioned, and you're going to take 25% of each of those. And if the high school got any progress points, you'll put it on top. One question that was in the email that came to me was, what are the results of the school performance scores or the letter grades? Actually, a school can earn rewards. Okay, if they're an A school and improve 5 points or reach 150, then they get some money from the state, if the state has any money to give. And then your lower performing schools at your B, C, D, and Fs, if they grow 10 points, they can earn their rewards. The only thing they can't have if that occurs is they cannot fail NCLB, the old NCLB policy, which is actually related to the subgroup percent proficient. The other issue would be sanctions. BESI policy says that if a school's an F, the district has to offer at least 2 choices for the parents to transfer to higher performing schools. A new law passed this last session called Act 853, says that any student in a D or F school can transfer to any A, B, or C school, even across district lines, as long as the school has room to take that particular student. We do get to write those policies ourselves. The letter grade scale is there on the left-hand side of the slide. I did want to point out that this year, 13-14, they are going to curve those particular scores so that we have the same number of elementary A's as we did last year, or possibly more. You could move up. The same number of B's, C's, D's, and F's. Same way with the high schools.
Thank you, Tom. Next up is Noel Hammett.
Thank you very much for having me here tonight. I'm I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about school performance scores and to also talk about our letter grades that Tom explained to us. The question for me tonight is, do Louisiana's school performance scores and letter grades have anything to do with reality? Do they pass any reasonable test? And I ask you to keep that in mind as we take a look at what the performance scores purport to measure. According to the state, they're based on student achievement data, as Tom explained, and they go on to further say they're to more clearly communicate the school quality. So the quality of our schools, according to the State Department of Education, is based in these school performance scores or letter grades. And the school performance scores have been around a while. The letter grades came in 2010. So the SPS, as we heard, is based on student achievement on state standardized tests and also some other factors that Tom shared with us. Dr. Edward Hurdle is one of the leaders in the field of test and measurement, and he gave the command performance in the field, if you will, the address, the memorial lecture, and he talked about what is that relationship between student performance on the test that we just heard about and the quality of teachers and the school, because it's kind of hard to talk about school quality. The school says, the state says we're taking over a school, but they don't take the students with it. They just take the school building, and then they fill it with another group of students. And it's an interesting question. What exactly is school quality? Well, if we're measuring student performance, Hurdle says we have to be careful of a couple of things. One is the basic fact that student performance on standardized test scores is a function of many things. About 10% is based on the teachers, all of the teachers that student has. Another 7% are based on factors related to the school, how it's set up, who's sitting next to you in the classroom. So about 17% of student performance on standardized tests is attributable to what happens in the school. But that big green section, that big green monster, those are out-of-school factors. And every research study has shown that out-of-school factors dwarf the in-school factors by a factor of 3 or 4 to 1. We also have some that are unexplained. The variation we simply can't assign to one category or another. But he said it's important to recognize that what we have in many cases is kind of the tail wagging the dog. 10% of a student's academic performance and growth on scores on standardized tests is attributable to the teacher. But what we then do at the state level is we attribute all of the responsibility to the school and to the teacher. So we get some interesting effects. One of the out-of-school factors that many of us are aware of, every teacher I know and every administrator I know is aware of this, income matters. Family income matters. No, it doesn't mean that a child born in a low-income family cannot exceed all expectations, go on to Harvard, become president, become doctor, lawyer. But the fact is, there are patterns that exist out there in the world of testing, and this is one test. It's really a wonderful assessment called the NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. The NAEP fourth grade reading test is given across the country to random students and districts, and none of the students take the whole test. You can't really prepare students for the NAEP, so it's a great way to evaluate how states are doing, and it also includes private and parochial schools. But if you look at this chart, students who qualify for free meals, that means their families make up to 130% of the poverty line, score a scale score of 206. The numbers don't mean anything until you recognize that 10 to 12 points added to that is another year of growth. So when we look at the next score, those students with reduced meal prices, they qualify for reduced meals, being between 130 and 185% of the poverty line. They score a 218 or 12 points greater. So they score about a year higher in the fourth grade on the test. And those students from middle-class families, not qualifying for free or reduced meals, score a 234 or 28 points better, greater than 2 years growth. So this fourth grade reading assessment gives us some indication of what income means in terms of family achievement, student achievement. When we look at private schools and parochial schools, we often hear, well, we need to do more like the private and parochial schools. Their scores have exactly the same pattern. When we put the two together, we see that the patterns are very much the same. Scores vary a little bit between public and private, but very little compared to the differences between low-income students and middle-class students. In 8th grade mathematics, the same pattern holds true. So the NAEP scores go out across the country. The assessment is given to students in public, private, and parochial schools. The scores come back, and we see the same pattern. Growth as we move up a year for those students getting reduced meal prices versus free, and another year going up to the middle-class students. So there's a clear pattern that shows us income really does matter. How does it affect scores across the state for schools? If we take all of the schools in the state of Louisiana, we take off those magnet schools and schools that select their students based on test scores, because that wouldn't work. We take all the regular schools, and if you're in A school, you have an average of 34% free lunch, that lowest category of income. If you're a B school, you're at 45%, C school at 60%, D school at 80%. And the schools taken over by the state, the F schools, an average of over 89% of the students qualifying for free meals. And when you add in the reduced meal prices, they're close to 100 effectively. There are groups that say, but yeah, that's the schools doing that. You do that in our schools. Somehow we're doing something wrong. And we must be doing it across all schools, public, private, and parochial, because we see the same patterns. But a group called the Broader, Bolder Approach to Education looked at all of the data, all of the research. These are some of the top scientists in the country, and they said evidence demonstrates that achievement gaps exist long before these students get to school. Well, let's take a look at some evidence that we have. This is a local school district that we look at the top 5 schools and the bottom 5 schools, the lowest performing according to the state of Louisiana. Now, I want to highlight the scores on this pre-reading readiness. This is kindergarten. The kids have just arrived in our school system. Look at the highest performing school in that district. These are elementary schools. In the highest performing school, 0% of the students were in the bottom quartile on a nationally normed test. 81% were in the top half of the distribution. Now look at the lowest performing school in the district. Remember, these are the incoming kids, the incoming students, long before we've had them in our system. 82% were from the bottom quartile in the nation, and only 3% came from the entire half of the distribution. So this tells us the gaps exist long before students arrive. We also have a problem with special needs students. Here in Lafayette, you just got a lot of students who don't have English as a dominant language. Their second language is perhaps English. They are English language learners. Many of them come from low-income families. They also have the ESS IEP, is Exceptional Student Services. That means they need special services for mental, emotional, or physical handicapping conditions. So low-income students with special needs, also needing some help with their English, score an average of 151 across the country. Students who don't have any of those characteristics score an average of 238. The gap there is the equivalent of roughly 7 years at the 4th grade level. So what we have is a state accountability system that doesn't account for any of these things. They don't make any distinction between a district with 90% of their students on free or reduced meal prices versus one at 30%. Not coincidentally, the highest performing district in the state has consistently had the lowest percent of free lunch. The lowest performing district in the state has had the highest percent of free lunch students in the state. The Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council is very concerned about the impact of special needs children and income on school performance scores. Why? Because what we have is a pattern where charter schools and some other schools try to weed out those students that don't do well on tests. One of the ways of doing that is to take special needs students and say, we don't really provide the services you need. You might want to go back to the Lafayette Public Schools. Across the state, we have a very small percentage of students with severe special education needs in our charter schools, nor do we have the equivalent English language learners percentages in our charter schools. So when they put this together, look at the pattern for students on free and reduced price meals. As that goes up, their scores go down. The high A, disabilities, 3.5%, 3.6%. Then you get to our alternative schools. I don't believe we have a single alternative school that's passing. We don't have any that are passing.
In the whole state.
Two. So again, you've got a high percentage of students with disabilities in those alternative schools. The state makes some mistakes, and they keep changing the formula every year for the last few years, and it will continue to change. And sometimes they make mistakes with those. This was a mistake the newspaper made with Lafayette. I looked at those numbers and I went, 15,000 going to charters? 1,500. But this is what it looks like within a district. This is a local district. These are middle schools. Look at that line. That's the relationship between the percent free meals, qualifying for free meals, and their school performance scores. Somebody might recognize that district. I also took a look here in Lafayette a few years ago. I read an article in the local paper, and it said that Northside High School was not doing very well. So I plotted all of the schools based on their percent free lunch. That's the deepest income, the lowest income category. And I plotted those 4 schools, and lo and behold, Northside was above the line, doing slightly better than predicted, whereas Caring Crow was doing slightly lower than predicted. But again, under the state accountability system, there is no accountability based on your demographics in your school system. The high schools really have a tough time with the ACT. You saw how the scores are given. Look at the scores as they go up with family income. This is across the country on every standardized test. Who knows the average score for African American students in the U.S. on the ACT? It's been holding for the last 10 years at around 17. How many points do you get for a 17? 0. You have to get all the way to 18. So again, this is a disparate impact on schools that are heavily African American. Does the school performance score really measure school quality? I hope the facts, the data provided to you give you some sense that it really doesn't. It measures student bodies and not the quality of teachers and not the quality of instruction in that school. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Noel. Our next speaker is Dr. Frank Delfalo.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm pleased to come here. It seems like I have a forum every single week because these are the very topics that I teach in my graduate courses. My challenge this evening, and my graduate courses last 3 hours a session, my challenge this evening is to try to cram it all into 10 minutes into a format that everybody can understand. So wish me luck. What are we going to talk about tonight? Purpose of assessment. Why do we assess? Assessment validity. Are we assessing, are we measuring what we set out to assess? Well, the design of the ACT, I just picked on the ACT. I could have spoken about the EOC exams, the ILEAPs and the LEAPs, but I just decided to pick on the ACT. Factors that impact school performance scores. We addressed some of them, but there are more. Perception data, and that's a thing that I think is really missing in our assessment of school performance. Also, data from graduates. We don't get any information from the students that leave our schools. We need to find out how they're doing after they leave us. Okay, purpose of assessment. Assessment, if I were your teacher and you had to do a 10-page paper, let's say. My students do more, but I'll just say 10-page paper. And I just handed it back with a B and I circled it and I said, here you go. What does that mean? Does it inform the learner? A student, I feel responsible that if I'm going to give a score or assess someone's performance, they need to know exactly what that means. The student needs to know, okay, I got a B this time. What do I need to do next time to get an A? Okay, so it informs the learner. Assessment informs the learner. Assessment also should inform instruction, so that if I give an assessment and I'm a math teacher and I look at the assessments and I find that, in this last exam, most of the students made mistakes in computation. Well, that tells me something. That tells me that I need to focus my lessons not only in teaching the content, but I also need to focus on computational skills. Just an example, it's limitless, all of the information you can get from assessments that unfortunately the state doesn't provide our school districts with, or in many cases the students as well. Validity. This is a key thing. We use the ILEAPs, the LEAPs, the EOC exams, and the ACTs as a measure of teacher quality, of school quality. What are the tests actually designed for? They're designed to evaluate the student's strengths and weaknesses, in the case of the ACT, and their readiness for college. It doesn't say anywhere in the manual. There's a manual you can, just question here, validity. What's it designed for? We wouldn't think of using a driver's test for a passenger car, using those results to determine how well somebody can drive an 18-wheeler. But in many cases, we're doing that. We're using tests and assessments in manners for which they were never designed. And this is where I was referring to. I looked on the online, and I looked at the technical manual. And the technical manual gives a lot of information about the purpose of the test, the design of the test, validity, reliability measures, how they arrived at the questions, how to interpret the data. And nowhere does it say in the ACT technical manual that they're designed to measure teacher performance or school performance. Why is the state doing that? And it's the same thing. If you looked in the LEAP and the ILEAP exams, it's the same thing. Nowhere is it mentioned that these exams are used to measure school performance. Just like, again, I'll repeat myself, you can't use a driver's test for a car to predict how somebody's going to do driving an 18-wheeler. Oh, and if you're interested, there's where you can look. It's a PDF file. You can download it and read that boring manual. Okay, again, what affects validity is how we interpret the scores and how they're used. So we are interpreting them, I think, incorrectly. We're using them the way they were not designed to be used. It just shoots the whole idea of validity out the window when we use the scores in that manner. Again, the purpose of the ACT is to measure, predict performance of individual students, not to represent the quality of instruction in a school. You won't find it, I guarantee you won't find it in the manual or any manual. And again, I mentioned to inform the learner, that is very important. Think about this. If I were looking for a doctor, I might come to you and I say, hey, look, I need a good general practitioner. Give me a good general practitioner. And if you told me, oh, Dr. Smith is an A doctor, what do you do? What does that mean? Okay? But if you told me Dr. Smith is an excellent doctor, he takes his time with you. He does thorough examinations. He takes his time to explain what he's doing and what the results mean. He's got a very good office staff. You don't have to wait long for an appointment. Those are measures that inform me as to what makes a good doctor. Not, he's an A doctor, he's a B doctor. Okay. Okay, and again, I mentioned to inform instruction. That is very important. These ACTs scores will help the teachers to find out if I'm an English teacher and I looked at the English portion of the ACT, I could find out the strengths and weaknesses of my students, and I could get a general understanding of where they stand and maybe some things I need to adjust in instruction. That's what these scores are meant to do. Okay, some factors that impact school performance scores. And having been a principal, one of the things that was frustrating for me would be to train my staff in a certain, let's say a reading comprehension strategy. And everybody gets trained in it, and then the next year, some of my staff leave, okay? I was fortunate in my case, I had pretty stable staff. But in those school districts where there's a lot of turnover with teachers, the principal is constantly having to retrain these teachers in these instructional strategies. And we all know too that the teachers, if they're there for a while, there's consistency. They get to practice and refine and shape those newly acquired skills as the years go on. So when there's a lack of stability in the population of teachers, it could cause a problem. And I think the same thing happens with students. If a student is in my building, and if I'm teaching, I don't know, elementary school, and I have kids from K through 6, and they've been with me the whole time, they're used to a certain writing process or a certain problem-solving process that the kids and the teachers taught and learned and practiced throughout the whole time. But what happens? Many school districts, the kids who start the 5th grade, okay, you get so many kids, and then when you look next year, of those kids, how many are still there to start the 6th grade? Again, population stability is a critical factor that does impact school performance. You put all this work into getting things improved, but if you don't deal with the same kids and the same teachers all the time, you're not going to make the progress that you would expect to make. And that's something, excuse me, that's something that needs to be controlled for. Now, controlling for something, I don't know, without getting too involved in statistics, if I were interested in finding the body weight of everybody here, everybody would stand on a scale, and would I have your true body weights? Probably not, because some people are wearing clothes that are heavier than others. Some people are wearing flip-flops, and other people are wearing heavy dress shoes, suit coats. All these factors need to be controlled for. So I need to find some way, obviously you have people take their clothes off and stand on the scale. So you're controlling for the variations to come up with a true score. I think we need to control for population stability with the teaching and with the student staff when it comes to creating a school score as well. And I don't hear much about that. And I think that would be a suggestion for me if I were part of the process of trying to refine it. Another thing that needs to be done is there's an idea of perception data. What do people think about the school? And what people think about a school is reality. We need to be getting data from the students. We need to find out, how do the students feel about school, about their teachers? Do the students feel that the teachers care about them? Do the students feel that they are being well prepared, that they're being challenged? Or we can go on and on with different types of questions, but that information is very valuable and it could help us improve our schools. Perception data from the students. Perception data from the parents and the community is also very important. We need to find out how the people feel about our school. Perception data from the teachers. And perception data from the administrative staff. All of this information should be collected and should be a part of the school performance score. If you really want to have a true score, you need to do that. Okay? and school staff. That would be everybody else that works for the school. This is important. The district I worked in New York State, it was a tradition. We would get back the graduates. They'd come back to the high school, and we would administer surveys to them, asking them, okay, if you're out on the workforce, how well were you prepared? What do you feel you didn't get that you think would have made you a better worker? And we would ask the same thing of the college students. And it was a great time for the kids to come back to their schools, see their old teachers, visit old friends, but we picked their brains to find out how well they felt they were prepared. We learned a lot from that. We learned, for example, when we first started, that the kids, when they left our district and went to the university, they were weak in computer skills. So we used that information and we had a 5-year plan, and we worked on bringing computers into the districts. Some of them felt that they were weak on writing essay questions. We worked on that in the high school and the middle school to develop the kids' essay writing skills, so that by the time they left, I think the school improved and the kids improved and instruction improved, just from finding out from our kids. Okay. That's basically what I forgot to push the buttons, guys. That's all. Let's see. All right. Use the data to inform your school improvement efforts. Find out what they have to say so that you can fix what's not right. And thank you.
Thank you, Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Del Pablo. Our next and last speaker is Dr. Patrice Pujol.
Okay, let's see if I can get it going here. I'm sorry.
Top middle, slideshow.
There we go.
I have a little different perspective than our other panelists in that I kind of wear two hats here. First, I'm a superintendent, I've been a principal, but also I'm on the accountability commission. And so I've been watching this whole unfolding of accountability for a long time. And so you might ask, why do we have accountability? What's it for? And what should be included? And I'll tell you that the commission is made up of a lot of different perspectives on that question. And so you have community members and parents and business owners and business leaders who will say, well, we need some transparency around how our kids are really doing. You have educators who will say, yeah, but we have all these other factors that you don't understand. And so you kind of have these competing voices around this idea of accountability and what it means. And I'll tell you that a lot of the things that have been raised tonight, the commission is actually grappling with right now. And through the years has grappled with at different points. And it's the whole idea of what does make a good school? What is a good school? How would we define a good school? And part of that is, I think that gets at some of what the other speakers talked about, is what is the role of status achievement, where are kids right now, versus progress. Are the kids making progress? Are they indeed improving, learning more, growing? And I think that's something that we are grappling with in our state and certainly on the commission. So when you think about what a school looks like and whether it's a good school, right now, as Tom indicated, the only progress that's really figured into the school performance score is at the bottom end. And so if kids are not proficient, then you can get progress points or bonus points added if you bring the kids to proficiency. But there's been a lot of discussion about, is that enough? Is that really telling the story that we want to tell about our schools? And should there be maybe progress figured into the entire system? Or should there be some other factors in the system? And just to give that some clarity, let me talk a little bit about what we are grappling with in the commission. You can see that this is from the commission's timeline. You can see that the things we're working on right now are progress versus status and what impact that has on district and school performance. And then also, how do the evaluation of teachers and leaders play into this? Because that's a whole other piece of accountability. We have school performance scores, but you also have teachers getting performance measures based on how much value they add to students based on the standardized tests. And so those are all things that we will be working on. Additionally, as if it's not complex enough, over the next 12 years, the state has determined that we will move the bar on proficiency from basic, where it is now, to mastery. And so the commission also is grappling with what will that look like? How will we raise the bar? Do you front load it? Do you back load it? You know, how does that look? And so there are lots of things in front of the commission that have very strong implications for our schools and our districts. But just to give you a tale of two schools, I mean, look at this. If you look at the the top school, it had a letter grade of high letter grade, A, but 0% of the teachers were highly effective on their value added, and they had no change in their percent proficiency. But I will tell you that on the back end of that, I'll tell you that I have schools that are A schools where you might only have, out of 800 kids, 20 kids that aren't proficient. So it's hard to move how many kids you have proficient. You have to really start looking at how many kids are you moving up the ladder into mastery and advanced. But then look at the bottom school. It's a C letter grade, but it made 10% proficiency increase, and over 80% of the teachers were highly effective on their VAMP score. And so you ask yourself as a parent, which of these schools is a good school? Who's moving kids? Who's serving the needs of kids? And that's a question that we grapple with. As a superintendent, I'll tell you that Ascension Parish is a microcosm of the state. Sometimes people look at Ascension Parish and they think, well, they're kind of wealthy and, you know, of course they're doing well. We are an A school district, but we have some of the most affluent communities in the state, and we have some of the most impoverished communities in the state. And I'll tell you that some of the data you've looked at tonight indeed is mirrored in Ascension Parish. Certainly on the top end, our affluent schools are our A schools. I will tell you though that we, several years ago, created a turnaround zone. And in that zone, we have managed to change the dynamic a bit on what that looks like, and have moved schools to a point that we do have some schools that have 80% poverty that are B's and C's now. They're not all D's and F's as they were originally. This graph just kind of shows you some of the same thing about the tale of two schools. All of the green, those are our lowest performing schools. The blue are our high performing schools. You can see that our low performing schools improve their school performance score year over year, almost without exception, at a much higher, greater rate than our high performing schools do. However, it's not enough. The bar keeps raising and you can't ever seem to catch up and get to the high level. Interestingly, we have started a program where we've taken teachers from our highest performing schools and had them come into a leadership academy in our lowest performing, most impoverished community. And the comments I get from those teachers are, oh my goodness, If these kinds of things were happening in the A school I just left, we'd be blowing the top off of the accountability system. So there's definitely, we have examples across the state of low-performing schools that are doing things, extraordinary things, that are moving kids, but you just never can, they're so far behind, it's hard to move them to a point that you're going to get at that really high level of performance. And I tell you that there are implications that go with this for our accountability system. If we put progress in at all levels, what would that look like? It's one of those things, be careful what you ask for. I have heard superintendents and district people ask for years, well, they ought to base this on how much we grow kids. Well, the first time we put any kind of growth factor in last year, you heard the hubbub around the state. It was crazy. And so, you know, the devil is in the details. If we go to a progress system where we give value to schools that really move student achievement beyond the expectation, what will that look like? Are we then only going to identify another set of low-performing schools? So, you know, there's a lot of interesting dynamic around that. I've also heard that there is, heard the possibility of what if you gave 2 letter grades? What if you gave a letter grade for status, for where kids are at right now in the moment, and you gave another letter grade for progress? So that's a possibility. And these are all things that the commission's grappling with, and I'll tell you that how the commission sees this varies greatly depending upon the role of the individual commission member. We have people who've been on the commission since its inception, who are strong industry and business leaders, who think it should all be about status and transparency, and it shouldn't matter where kids come from. Conversely, you have educators who say, wait, there are all these other factors. And so it really is dependent upon the role where folks come down on. The other thing I'll say is that, you know, when you look at classroom teacher accountability and what that system looks like, interestingly, by the state's own measure, there is no correlation between the percentage of teachers who are highly effective on value added and school performance score. So you can have these teachers that are moving kids like crazy according to the assessment, but the school performance score is not moving to top levels. And again, in our district, I will tell you that there is a correlation, but it's not the one you think. Because of some extraordinary measures we've taken in terms of who we put in our lowest performing schools, most of our highly effective value added comes in our lowest performing schools in Ascension Parish. But we get some schools up to higher levels, but we can't get our most impoverished ones up. We started out with 8 D and F schools. We now have 3 Ds, and the rest are Bs and Cs of those 8. And certainly, you will see that even though within what we call our turnaround zone, the Ds are most impoverished community. 95% free and reduced lunch, you know, lots of barriers to learning, generational poverty. Our Bs and Cs are less poverty, more transitional poverty, and you certainly can see the distinction. And so, as you think about this, and we look at what is important in an accountability system, these are all things we have to grapple with. And then when you add in the measure of raising the bar on accountability and what makes proficiency over time, then that brings a whole nother discussion into it. So if we can't make it with our most impoverished kids at the current proficiency level, what is our shot of doing it at the mastery level rather than at the basic level? So that will be a whole discussion that will have to be had. I do appreciate the fact that the state says we'll take 12 years to determine that rather than that we're going to go there tomorrow. Usually they think a long time is 2 years before they'll get there. So I do appreciate that. But I will say, I think that's going to be a major, major challenge. So just wanted to share with you, this whole idea of growth versus status and what role should each play in our accountability system. And I think some of the data presented earlier will suggest to you there are some factors that really impede a school's ability to produce high status in the moment. And my experience as superintendent is that we can generally produce growth, much harder to produce high levels of proficiency with kids who are way, way behind to start with. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. That was a lot of information to take in. In the time remaining, we will take questions from the audience. Your questions do matter. We have a microphone right here at the edge of the dais. If you would like to move to the microphone to ask your question, we ask that you please make your question concise so that our speakers can address the most possible questions. Is there anyone who has a question in the audience? I have one to get us started. I've been sitting here listening to everything, and it's a little overwhelming, quite frankly. But from what I can see, it doesn't seem that we are always really looking at the factors that seem to impact either student achievement or that measure teacher impacts in a way that work together. So I'm wondering if any one of the speakers would like to address any opportunities perhaps to look at different methodologies. I know Dr. Pujol looked at a few of them. Was there anybody else on the panel who would like to address that? Noel Hammett, thank you.
I guess we need to come to the microphone.
Maybe I can bring it to you. Can you bring it over here? See it for
I don't know how far I'll reach, but
See how
I have two brand new knees, but they're not broken in yet. So if I fall, come pick me up.
No, see if we can get you to the table.
Can we get to Tom?
Okay.
We'll just go to Tom with all the questions. Recently, I had a conversation with one of the reporters here in Lafayette, and I suggested that we've got a great university here in Lafayette. We have involved parents and a community that's very engaged, and that we ought to look at trying something completely different. We don't measure the most important things. If you ask parents, what are the most important things? How would you measure the success of a school? One of the measures is very simple. Most parents will tell you, when my child wants to go to school, that's a good sign. That's a very good sign. We don't measure that. We don't ask parents, how do you judge the school? The fact is, the state has never asked parents. We have this system that says it's all about parental choice, except, for example, when the state takes over a school or imposes certain things on a community, we don't ask that community. We don't ask the parents. In Baton Rouge, I remember one of our schools was being taken over by the state. They've had it for 6 years now. It's never done as well as it was doing when we had it at the local school system level. But the state ran it for 6 years, a series of charter schools and the state. But I remember when 160 parents from the school went to a Bessie meeting and begged the state not to take over the school. There were the parents saying, we don't want you taking over our school. They were totally dismissed. Their input was lost. We don't allow for parental input in evaluating schools, and I think that's foolish at the very basic level. And I think it's also useful to ask students how they're doing.
I just want to add, as I mentioned in
See if I can get it.
Just to paraphrase Dr. Hammett's remarks, I just want to say that if you have a school, you're a principal, you're a teacher in that school, it is important to get the perceptions of the parents and the students. That's important. But the reason it's so important is so that we can find out where their areas of concern are so we can fix it. That is critical. If we want to get better, we need to find out what needs to be addressed. And if our parent surveys say to us that it's not, we don't feel that it's a very safe school, then that tells us we need to do something about school safety. We need to improve the environment and whatever that might be. So again, it's important to listen to what the parents and the teachers and the students have to say, but we need to use that data as well.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, I'd like to ask, looking at your presentations, it seemed that it appears to me from the correlation that you get with the disadvantaged students and the free meal students and the paid students, that strong correlation suggests if a disadvantaged student goes to an F school or if a disadvantaged student goes to an A school, they have about the same probability of failing. So is there any evidence that shows that it's better to have disadvantaged students all together in one class so that they have a peer group that they identify with? Or is there evidence that you should mix the students together so you have the disadvantaged and the advantaged students all in one place?
Dr. Pujol?
Just a couple of thoughts on that. One is, I'll say that we have offered school choice in Ascension Parish because we have had some F schools. And what we have found happens is that when our kids take choice and they go into our A schools, that the kids who were doing pretty well before do pretty well. The kids who were not doing well before don't do very well. We've actually gotten to a point now where I worry when I send my kids from a D school to an A school, in that we put so many extraordinary measures into our lowest performing schools that our A schools aren't doing because they don't have to, that I worry whether or not they'll get we're doing them a disservice by sending them into the A school. But I will tell you the reverse of that is that when you have a school that is all low performing, all free and reduced lunch, that it is hard to move the entire population. In one of my A schools, we might have, 20 kids that are not at proficiency. In one of my F schools or D schools, over half the student population, 3/4 of the student population is not at proficiency. And so it's such a Herculean effort to try and catch that number of kids up. But I'll tell you that in a best case scenario, I could move those kids all around and do the things I'm doing in my low performing schools for every kid in my district. If I could get to that level, I think I could move all kids farther quicker.
I just want to make one comment, and that is, I think all too often we focus totally on the schools and we forget that there's a reason why students come to school impoverished and years behind in terms of their academics. If you remember the lowest performing school in that one parish I showed you, where only 3% of the students came from the top half of the distribution, the rest, almost all of them, were at the bottom quartile. Well, one of the questions is, what can we do as communities to ensure that we don't have students starting school 3 and 4 years behind their middle class peers? And there are things we can do that are much greater in impact than all of the things we do within our schools. And I'll give you just one example. How many of you have books for your children in your homes when your kids were growing up? You read to them, you had many books. The single greatest predictor in a 27-country study, the single greatest predictor of a child's academic success was the number of books in the home. And in far too many homes, the number of books is 0 to 3. In East Baton Rouge Parish, in our low-income schools, we did a survey with our volunteers in public schools. The average number of books was 3 books in the home. If we can move that to over 100, The data from national NAEP studies suggests that we will move those students nearly 3 years in progress by the 4th grade. So one of the questions we ought to ask is, what can we do for students before they ever arrive? And we know which schools are going to be getting these kids. So what are the things that we can do? And by the way, it's one of the cheapest things you can do. Far cheaper than the remediation of taking those kids and recycling them in the 1st grade, kindergarten, 2nd grade. That's a tremendously expensive undertaking. Books in the home, very inexpensive.
We have another question. And please speak loudly and clearly if you don't mind.
Great, thank you. My question is particularly for Dr. Pujols. I was wondering what type of incentives or policies can be set in place in Ascension Parish to attract teachers, administrators, or whatever to want to engage the at-risk schools?
We've tried a lot of different things, quite frankly. We have not found that just a pay stipend across the board for everybody helped us any. We tried that first and attracted one teacher who was not very successful. And so that wasn't the answer. I'll tell you, in our turnaround zone, we use the Teacher Advancement Program, which is a system of strong job-embedded staff development with career ladders for teachers, where teachers can really work with their peers but still stay connected to the classroom, and a very strong instructional rubric that helps inform teacher practice. And it has a strong paper performance piece. But what has attracted our teachers because of that system is the opportunity to come and collaboratively attack such an important problem. And we give our teachers a lot of flexibility in terms of time. The group I was talking about, where we have attracted some teacher leaders to come into our most impoverished school, it's like we don't promote you to an instructional coach, to assistant principal or a principal unless you've had some experience in these types of schools, because we think experience teaching in these types of schools gives you a whole different perspective than what you could get in a school where everybody comes prepared. And in every school, there's some kids who need this kind of intervention. So every leader needs to understand what it takes. And so that's one piece that we really have been working on, is how can we set it as a value in our school system that having experience in what we call our turnaround zone gives you the experiences you need to be a leader in our district, no matter what kind of school you're going to serve in. And we've gotten our principals to buy in. Our principals in our high-performing schools are sending some of their best teachers over to our lowest performing schools, because we're saying, look, give them to us for a year or two, and we'll send them back to you, and they'll have the skill set that you need in your school too. And we've really sold that well, because when teachers have transferred from these low-performing schools where we have our TAP system into higher-performing schools for a lot of different reasons, not because they weren't successful, but maybe they it's geographically closer to where they live, or for whatever reason. Our principals have been astounded at the skill set they come with. So they've sold what these experiences do for you as a teacher leader through their own actions. And so our principals in our high-performing schools are willing to send their best and brightest teachers and their teacher leaders into our low-performing schools for a limited amount of time, knowing they're going to get them back, and they'll have an influence on their entire faculty once they return, having had these experiences. So it's a lot of different moving parts to creating a value where it's an honor and a privilege to serve in the neediest schools. But that's really what you have to create. You have to create a sense that there's something special for you as a professional to be able to come into a school and really make a difference in moving student achievement among the kids who most need the best teachers to make it happen.
hand, it's not on. The mic's not on. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay, so let me try to regenerate that whole question. It's around the points awarded to the LEAP test. First of all, is it going to be the same point allocation like the PARC test? And why is the choice to have 0 points be awarded at both the unsatisfactory level and at the next level, approaching basic? And I guess you don't get points until you get that third level. Does that impact the statistics? Or is there-
Generally speaking, I don't believe anything that they tell me until it's written into policy. It comes back from the Louisiana Register, and it's gone through the public process. They have told us that the performance levels on PARC, that there will be 4 performance levels. Okay, but there is no policy that says that at this point. Why? I'm going to repeat the whys that I've heard. I don't know if I believe. Why doesn't approaching basic get any points? Well, because basic is proficient, and that is success, and we're not giving any points for anything that's not success. Now, they did soften that by building that progress point system to where kids who were below basic last year, and if they're improving, you would earn some points for those students.
Yeah, and a follow-up to that. The bonus points are only given for moving from those lower levels, not for saying going from master to advanced master. And one more question. I was very interested to hear that by 2025, there'll be a new level that will have to be mastered. Well, we're in 2014 now, and we've gone through No Child Left Behind, where we're all supposed to be proficient, and all children aren't. So I'm really hoping that we'll work fast and furiously to try to make us all mastery.
I'm sure our teachers just work harder for it.
Let's do that one on the record.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a great concern. We went through this with No Child Left Behind. We were supposed to be at 100% proficiency by 2014. Obviously, that didn't happen. You know, I don't have any reason to think that in 12 years we're going to move every kid to mastery. Do I think we have the capacity to move more kids to mastery than we're currently doing? Yes, I absolutely do. And I do think that the accountability system, where I think the accountability system works best is in high-performing schools to some extent. Because in my district, not just based on my own personal experience, but in our district, you know, the schools that are high-performing, they know they're doing well, they know they're high-performing, and prior to accountability, there wasn't much to keep them, to have any kind of push to move forward. I will say that accountability has set a mindset in our district of you've got to get better every year, and so even our highest performing schools feel a need and a pressure to move kids. It's kind of like the old Randy Newman song about LSU. They come in dumb and leave dumb too. Well, that kind of had that among some of our high performing schools. They come in basic and leave basic too, you know, and when kids were capable of doing more. And so I think we have been able to create an urgency to move kids to the higher levels of learning in our high performing schools. That being said, I just keep being struck by what our teachers say. If what's happening in our low-performing schools, what's happening in our high-performing schools, we'd be off the charts. And so our pressure as a district is how do you make that happen? More questions on the floor? Jim?
Tell us about those
I'm sorry.
programs.
I'm sorry, Jim.
Tell us about those programs that you're developing for the schools.
It's truly about a mindset as far as they can be pushed in a year's time. I mean, it's not magic, but it is a different way of thinking about kids. We don't teach to the whole class. We don't even teach to groups. I mean, every single kid on every teacher measure we're tracking, we're analyzing, we're seeing where are the gaps, what is this kid missing, and our teachers are doing that collaboratively. You know, they are gathered up around the student work every day, determining what does each child need to take the next step. I wish I could say that, you know, there's a magic bullet or there's a computer program you could go buy, but it is strictly smart people gathered up around individual kids and being willing to do something different with each one if that's what it takes to move.
Cautionary tale. It is very important that we not lose sight of what education is all about. It's not about test scores for students. It's not about meeting some goal that was set far away in Baton Rouge. It's about doing the right things at the right time for children, right then and right there. And you know, there's a lot of cautionary notes out there. Campbell's law says, you know, you got to be very careful what you measure because you end up corrupting the measures. There has been a huge problem across the country with variations of cheating. I'm trying to think of another word for it, but it's really cheating. I remember my niece one time telling me over in Texas, you know, Texas was the miracle state till we found out the miracle was a lie. And it truly was. They were doing lots of things to hide the facts. And I will tell you right now, in Louisiana, you have to ask the question, why is the Department of Education fighting legal battles to prevent the release of data to independent researchers across the state? I have been in court several times in the last few months trying to find out why data that was openly available 2 and 3 years ago is now being totally hidden from the public. If your data supports your position on progress, what things are going on in the Recovery School District of New Orleans, then why the secrecy? But the fact is there has been a large amount of cheating going on across the country, and there are a variety of ways in which it's happened, and it's often hurting children, ultimately. But one of the things that happens is you tend to push kids out. It's too easy sometimes for one school to push a child out and send them over to another school to improve your scores. We've seen that happening in charter schools. We've also seen it in regular public schools across the state and across the country. But in a number of areas where they were talking about miracles occurring, you can go back to the New York Times and read an article by Diane Ravitch about there are no miracle schools. I'm quoted in there because there were several schools where they had claimed miracles, one in Chicago, one in Miami, another in Denver, Colorado. In every one of those schools, when we went and looked at the data, they were simply playing games with the data. Ultimately, school is about creating a difference in the life of the child. And I think all too often we forget that, and we don't have a way of measuring that, and we don't see what's going on. There's a cautionary tale that was just out in the newspapers, and a journal article by a professor at one of our universities talking about the no excuses schools. You've heard of no excuses schools, many of them charter schools, but no excuses accepted. And what we found is kids taking 3 hours of math and 3 hours of reading and being treated much as they would in prison. And for some of the kids, it didn't work. They left. They dropped out. But the kids were saying something that we used to joke about. What's the difference between prison and school? In prison, you get out early for good behavior. In schools, you have to do the time. Okay, we need more flexibility for kids, we need more ways of evaluating how children are doing. We've got a tough task ahead in trying to figure that out for special needs children on the accountability commission. Thank you.
And one thing I'll say, when I talk about teachers being gathered up around student data, I'm not talking about the standardized assessments, I'm not talking about the teachers' formative assessments looking like the standardized assessments. I'm talking about writing samples, thinking samples, ways that we try to assess how students are thinking and what they can produce, and try to analyze where it's going wrong if it's going wrong. And that kind of work is slow and tedious and hard, and requires a lot of high-level thought and planning, but it's what has to happen if we're going to move kids forward. Would anyone else like to add a last thought? Otherwise, that will be our last question. Thank you all for attending the forum tonight, and thank you.
The preceding program was made possible in part with production assistance provided by AOC Community Media.